More companies are going private. I mean, we've talked a lot about the tech stocks, or the tech companies who are not going public, but this is actually bigger than that, right?
Absolutely. I think there's a huge frustration among CEOs with the demands made in the public markets, the quarterly earnings pressures, the aggressive activists. I think, the endless SEC regulations, and increasingly, particularly with cash available, debt cheap, the allure of going private has absolutely increased.
And what do you think about this? Do you think this is, what are the long-term implications of it?
I think it was interesting at a Fortune event, Mark Andreessen said that if you go public in this environment, God help you. People are really scared. And you look at IPOs, and 40% of the recent IPOs are flat or down. So it's really, we've really had a couple bum years.
And some companies in the story, we point out, some companies are going public and then going back, kind of this like boomerang effect. I mean, it's really interesting. And so, Nick, we came up with this list of the 25 most important private companies, our first ever list of this kind. You were the editor on it. It's a great list. There's some really interesting companies on it. Some are the obvious names like Cargill and Bechtel. But I don't know, one that jumped out at me was McKinsey was on it, which I think is a fascinating company. So talk about that.
Well, there's sort of the power behind the throne in the suites of corporate America, right? I mean, there's no big company CEO that's never had a McKinsey consultant. So we really picked them because of that. And they're famous for not publicizing their role, which either means they don't take credit or they don't take blame for things that have happened. But they're there. They're sort of like, this is maybe an unfair comparison, they're like the CIA. They're sort of they've got their fingers in so many things.
And also number one on the list, which was really interesting, is Uber, which we talk so much about Uber these days. And when you talk about their size, even though they're huge, they actually are dwarfed by many of these other giant private companies, but they're number one. So why?
We picked Uber as number one because they're an idea. The platform, the technology, the use of freelance workers has become like the most influential idea in Silicon Valley. And the clearest litmus test is there are dozens, if not hundreds of companies that are out there pitching themselves as the Uber of this, the Uber of that.
Right.
And so that's really why, I mean, in addition to being a stunningly successful company, expansion, they are talking about, disrupting the car field, making their own self-driving cars. They're really shaking things up in so many ways, but it was the broader idea.
Right. So you could say the same about Airbnb, Anne, which is also on the list a little lower down, right?
Yeah, exactly. You have companies that are completely transforming the economy. And I think it's interesting that they're on this list. You have companies that are reaching the highest heights of business, the pinnacle of what we think of as successful businesses, and they're not public, which is crazy to think about.
Fascinating time.